Hello, we are finally back on the channel, and today we're going to be looking at one of the greatest horror movies of all time, as we look at Carrie, released in the year 1976. This was also a channel points request by Blade. Thank you, Blade, for using your points on this. So Carrie was adapted from a Stephen King novel published just 2 years earlier in 1974. The film was directed by Brian De Palma, who would also go on to direct films such as Dressed to Kill, Scarface, The Untouchables, Mission Impossible, Blowout, and Carlito's Way. The film centers around Carrie White, a shy 16-year-old girl with an overly religious mother and who is constantly bullied at school. Secretly, it also seems Carrie has been experimenting with telekinesis. She starts to come out of her shell a little bit more when she's invited to the prom, but that very quickly turns sour. The film was released in the United States and Canada on November 3rd, 1976 at a runtime of 98 minutes. It cost $1.8 million to make and made back around 34. In addition to being considered probably a top 10 horror film ever made, if not top 5, it's also considered just one of the greatest films ever made, period. In 2008, Empire made a list of top 500 greatest movies of all time, and this was ranked 86. Oh yeah, and one tiny thing I left out. You know how I said that this was adapted off a Stephen King novel? Yeah, this was the first piece of media adapted off a Stephen King novel. There has since been hundreds, literal hundreds, of movies and TV shows based off of Stephen King's work, and this was the first. It also launched the career of Sissy Spacek, who played Carrie, who still has an active acting career to this day. Also starring in the film were Piper Laurie, Amy Irving, William Catt, Nancy Allen, and a young John Travolta. And I said things ended up getting bad for Carrie, but just how bad? Well, we're gonna find out right now as we look back at Carrie, released in the year 1976. So our film begins at a high school where we meet 16-year-old shy girl Carrie White, who is taking a shower after gym class. During said shower, she begins to bleed, getting her first period. However, it appears that she was never taught what a period is and begins to freak out. The other girls in turn mock her and begin throwing tampons at her until her gym teacher, Miss Collins, intervenes. And by the way, I don't think they ever give Miss Collins a first name, so she's just Miss Collins. Carrie isn't allowed to go home by her principal, who can't even remember her name, and for the first time we see that Carrie might have telekinetic powers as she's able to knock an ashtray off a desk. This is further demonstrated when she's walking home and is mocked by a little boy on a bike, and she uses her powers to knock him off. We then meet Carrie's overly religious mother, Margaret, who, yeah, is super crazy. Carrie tries to ask her mother why she didn't tell her about having her period, and instead her mother blames it as a sin and slaps her with a book while forcing her to read scripture, and then locks her in a closet. And in said closet, Carrie begins praying to some sort of dark altar, which might explain the telekinesis. And later that night, Carrie begins freaking out in front of a mirror and breaks it using her telekinesis. However, she's able to stitch it back up before her mother comes up, but it's still very obviously broken and her mother can see. This woman's blind, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how she didn't see it. The next day at school in literature class, popular boy Tommy Ross has his poem read out, which Carrie finds beautiful, and then her teacher mocks her for calling it beautiful? Like, what the fuck? Miss Collins, meanwhile, who has excused Carrie from gym class, goes about punishing the other girls involved in making fun of her. She tells the girls, led by ringleader Chris, that they have to serve detention for the rest of the week with her doing extra activity, or else they'll be barred from prom. Meanwhile, Carrie is in the library looking up more telekinesis books, which I'm sure is fine. Meanwhile, the girls are running in place and Chris gets fed up, so she tells Miss Collins to stick him up their ass. So Miss Collins walks up and just bitch slaps her in the face, which I'm pretty sure you can't do, but it's the 70s, so fuck it. She tries to rally the other girls against Miss Collins, but Sue, one of the girls who clearly feels remorseful, just tells her to shut the fuck up, and Chris storms off, although she's now banned from prom. You know how I told you Sue was feeling remorseful? Well, she goes to talk to Tommy, who is her boyfriend, and tells Tommy that she wants him to invite Carrie to the prom instead of her. Later that night, Chris is out on the town with her boyfriend, Billy. She then begins giving him a blowjob in the car while also talking about how much she hates Carrie White, and I'm not sure how she's doing both of these things at the same time. The next day at school, Tommy goes to see Carrie in the library and asks her out to the prom, and she runs away. Carrie then goes to tell Miss Collins that this happened, and Miss Collins tells her that she should have some more self-confidence. Miss Collins then confronts Sue and Tommy, asking them what their game is, thinking they're trying to set Carrie up somehow. They insist that they're not, and Sue just wants Carrie to have a good time because she feels guilty over what happened. Tommy then gets Carrie's address somehow and then goes to her house to again ask her to the prom. Carrie tells him that he has to leave and that she can't go, but he refuses to leave, so in an effort to finally make him go, she agrees. Meanwhile, Billy, Chris, and two of their redneck friends go to a pig farm and bludgeon a pig to death. That night, Carrie and her mother are having dinner, and she tries to tell her mother about the prom before her mother just throws drink on her. She tells her that she can't go because Jesus or whatever, and then Carrie decides, you know what, fuck this, and uses her telekinesis to lock all the doors in the house. She then confesses to her mother about her telekinetic powers, which obviously her mother thinks is the work of the devil, and she might actually be right, to be fair. Carrie has finally put her foot down, however, saying that she's going to the prom and there's nothing her mother can do to stop her. Meanwhile, at the gym where the prom is going to be hosted, Billy and Chris are rigging up a bucket with pig's blood. Uh-oh. And the next day, one of Billy's shithead friends weasels his way in to being in charge of the ballads for prom king and queen. Tommy and Carrie then simultaneously spend the day preparing for the prom. Tommy buys a tux, while Carrie makes a dress herself and puts on makeup. Her mother again tries to stop her, but Carrie uses her telekinesis to lay her down on the bed and tells her to stay there until she comes back. Carrie and Tommy then go to the prom, and while Carrie is nervous, she looks like she's having a good time. Simultaneously, Sue leaves her house, apparently to make her way there. Carrie doesn't really want to dance, however, she kinda just wants to sit there until she has a talk with Miss Collins, who again tells her to have more self-confidence. Tommy then finally convinces her to dance and also teaches her to dance, and while they're dancing, it seems like Tommy's kind of fallen for her and actually kisses her. Later on in the night, Tommy and Carrie turns out are on the ballad for prom king and queen, and Tommy convinces Carrie to vote for themselves. Meanwhile, Carrie's mother is aggressively chopping carrots. And it appears Chris and Billy's evil plan is in motion as they're hiding under the stage with a rope that they'll pull to release the pig's blood. But the only way they can pull it onto Carrie is if she's the prom queen. And remember how I told you that his shithead friend was in charge of the ballads? Yeah, he rigs them, and using the rigged ballads, Carrie and Tommy win. The sadness of this is really driven home rather well, as it's really conveyed that this seems to be the greatest moment of Carrie's life. Like, she looks unbelievably happy, everyone's clapping for her, she's got a beautiful guy next to her. I mean, she feels like a princess and everything's going great, but it's not about to. Sue, meanwhile, has snuck into the gym to see Carrie being crowned prom queen, but then she notices the bucket and notices Billy and Chris under the stage. Before she can stop them, however, Miss Collins rushes her out of the gymnasium, and then Chris pulls the rope, and a whole bucket of pig's blood comes down right on Carrie. Not only that, but the bucket falls and hits Tommy in the head, which I think kills him? A couple people in the audience are laughing, and I believe it's only a couple, but Carrie gets it in her head that everyone, including Miss Collins, is laughing at her, and thereabout goes the rest of her religion. Using her telekinesis, she then closes the door, and everybody's about to die. She uses the special fire water hoses to spray everybody, and then electrocutes the principal using the microphone, which starts a fire in the whole gymnasium. She actually kills Miss Collins individually, squashing her with a basketball hoop, and then the whole place burns down, everyone dead except for Carrie, who leaves for the door. The fire brigade is coming, and they pass Carrie walking aimlessly down the road covered in blood, and right behind her is Billy and Chris, who are trying to run her over. Poor move though, as Carrie turns and sees them and flips their car multiple times, like at least 10 times, and then explodes the car, murdering them instantly. Carrie then returns home to see her living room kind of destroyed and also a bunch of candles lit. She heads upstairs and goes into the bathroom while her mother is very creepily standing behind the door. She then takes a bath in a situation that I feel more called for a shower, but it probably felt good regardless. Carrie then calls out to her mother, who emerges from behind the door and drops to her knees. Her mother admits that Carrie was conceived from premarital sex, and that Carrie herself is her greatest sin. She then holds Carrie before stabbing her in the back with a steak knife, causing Carrie to roll down the stairs. Her mother then closes in on her with the knife before Carrie finally defends herself, crucifying her mother with multiple knives, which kills her. Carrie then snaps out of it and realizes that she just murdered her own mother and tries to get her free before the house starts imploding in on itself. And I'm not sure if this is Carrie doing this involuntarily or if it's implied that this is supposed to be Satan collecting his debt, but either way the house is coming down. She takes her mother's body and they hide in the closet before the whole house sets ablaze and crumbles, killing Carrie. Sometime later, we see Sue, who is asleep and was the only survivor of the prom because remember, Miss Collins rushed her out the door. She has a dream where she goes to the remains of Carrie's house, which has a for sale sign and a cross symbol on it, which is vandalized with the words "Carrie White burns in hell." As she goes to put flowers on the grave, suddenly Carrie's bloody arm comes up and grabs her, causing her to wake up screaming and crying as her mother comforts her to end the film. So forget the horror aspect for a second. I will be damned if this isn't one of the saddest damn films ever conceived. Like, everyone always talks about, the part where she goes crazy and, the image of her covered in blood and the crazy eyes is iconic, but damn, this movie's sad. I mean, this poor girl has just an awful life. She's abused at home by her crazy-ass mother. She's abused at school. She's turning to satanic scripture just for a release from something or something different, learns telekinesis just in an effort to be different, and ends up, I guess, being consumed by the devil, I guess is what's implied, and killing everyone who tried to help her. I mean, she tricked herself. Again, it's interesting. I feel like it's implied that it was the devil controlling her, so I guess you could say the devil tricked her into thinking that everyone, including Miss Collins, who was just trying to help her, actually had it in for her. And again, it sucked that she singled out Miss Collins individually to kill. But I also, again, think that it wasn't actually her. I think that she was being possessed this whole time. I think that's kind of showed in the scene where after she kills her mother, it's like, oh wait, I didn't actually want to kill my mother, and she seems shocked that her mother's actually dead. So, yeah, I guess the moral of the story is don't dance with the devil, because you will die. Not only you will die, but clearly all your friends will die too. I mean, Jesus Christ. And this truly is one of the greatest horror films of all time. There's this movie on this channel that I named the greatest horror film of all time, and that was The Exorcist. I think I might still be sticking to that, but this, honest to God, might be number 2. Like, I talked about this being top 5 greatest horror films of all time. This might not even be top 5, not just top 3, but top 2. For me, it might be between this and The Exorcist for greatest horror films of all time. That's completely subjective, but I don't see how you could at all, even though it's subjective, all opinions are subjective, I don't see how you could think that this isn't up there. I don't know how you could watch this and not feel that. I mean, this movie is from 1976, and everything about it still holds up. The horror holds up, the effects hold up, the sadness of it holds up, the acting holds up, just the feelings, all the feelings that were generated by this movie in 1976 still hold up, in my opinion, in the year 2023. And that's truly what makes a movie timeless. Also, this movie got a sequel, which was bad. Very, very bad. Sue did return, but it was bad. I don't even know if we're going to cover that. It was so bad. Although I've done terrible movies on purpose before, but it might just piss me off. It also got 2 remakes. There was a 2002 television remake, which was okay, but not as good as this one, and a 2013 movie remake, which was, it was better than the sequel, but it was maybe not as good as the television remake. But I mean, remaking this movie is like remaking The Exorcist, which I think they actually did recently, or was it a sequel? I haven't seen it, I don't know. But you're not going to win. I mean, this is one of the greatest films ever. Again, not just horror, it's one of the greatest films ever. And it's not touchable. They could remake it 1,000 times, and this version would still be the best one. So yeah, for some reason you have not seen Carrie, trust me, see Carrie. This is absolutely on that list I've spoken of before of greatest films ever, that if you're into movies and you want to watch some of the greatest films ever made, this has to be on your list. But that is going to do it for my look back at Carrie. Next week on the channel, we will be looking at Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. But that is next week, and for today, that is it for me. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to leave it a like. If you didn't like it, don't. If you want to subscribe, as I'm currently recording this, we're like 3 subscribers away from 1,000 on this channel, which is crazy, so if you want to help me get there, that'd be awesome. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the video description, as well as the names of all my patrons. Thank you to my patrons for supporting me and my channels. I appreciate you guys. With all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taft. This has been my look back at Carrie, released in 1976, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.